You gonna be banned on TikTok or anything? There's been nothing last.
No, they deleted my my TikTok video about the methane. Have you never been banned?
Oh, I did.
You got banned?
Yeah.
What for?
It was time I put out something about slurry or something, and a pile of vegans came onto it.
And then you got banned?
Yeah, I got banned for a week of it.
I never get vegans. I always wish I did.
So, I thought we would resurrect the Loft very, very temporarily, just to have some farmers giving their opinion on things. So, in the hot seat tonight, we have Barry Reid, who is recently featured on FarmFLiX. Now, you have no social media presence, so maybe people don't know you as well as they might.
Just with yourselves and similar platforms, that's all.
He's going to start TikTok.
Yes.
I have TikTok, but I don't have time.
That's a proper farmer right there.
I don't have time.
What does that say about us?
So you're probably the best known here, Andrew.
Maybe, I don't know.
I would say of the three of you, you're definitely the best known.
I'm better known than Barry.
And Chris, you trade on TikTok as Farm with Jack?
Yeah.
Yeah. So give me a rundown on the farms. Who's doing what? Who's representing sheep? Who's representing dairy? Has anybody got beef? What's the crack?
I'm sheep, run 800-900 ewes and contract. We're second generation contracting, employing 4 full-time year round and
so in the mix
part-time
of your business, that's what, 50-50 or?
Depends you'd rather talk turnover, contract and profit, it probably is the sheep, unfortunately. Okay. That's the way it is.
Andrew, if somebody doesn't know FarmTheory, what's the mix?
Dairy farmer, but because of TB, we're also accidentally beef farmers. Okay. So that's our business.
And Chris?
We'd be very mixed farm. We can dabble with everything. We have, well, it's mainly dairy, and then we keep all the beef on from the dairy. Then we're small suckler herd, and then about 250 ewes, breeding ewes. So type of ground we have is just very marginal, so we can't do all of one. That's the main reason. So
I would call that a decent mix. We've no poultry, we've no pigs,
no tillage,
but that's Fermanagh and
Tyrone.
Yeah.
That's life.
Why are you called Farming with Jack if your name's Chris?
That was a nickname I got in school.
Yeah.
I may accidentally call you Jack, and
it's hard to like.
It's how I've perceived I know you.
I'll go with either.
For this evening, we're calling him Jack.
I am assuming. Now, tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
All three of you have basically inherited your positions on farms. These are not first generation farms.
Yes.
So, what was their gut reactions out the gate to the budget?
Well, I had a strong suspicion it was coming.
Did you believe they would actually pull the trigger?
No.
I didn't until I made a video like 3 months ago about the rumoured inheritance tax change. And I looked at what all other European countries done. And we were the odd one out.
Okay.
So that made me more certain that it was likely to change because we would just be falling in line with most other countries. And I was so convinced that I got my dad to like transfer over a fairly big chunk of the farm before the 30th of October so that what he owns we'll be able to pass it on under the threshold now. So
when you say threshold, what do you mean by threshold?
The 2 million.
Okay.
Between my mother and father.
And you're saying pass over, are you talking about the gifting 7-year rule? Right. We'll get to the rules in a second.
Yeah.
So now that it's happened, how many of you have you got family coming behind you that's going to take on the next generation of farming? Are you at that phase yet? Or are your kids small? Or what?
Too young.
So you're all in limbo as to is there a successor on these farms?
There is a successor, but I haven't just chose who it is on my farm.
Okay.
All my kids are 5 and 3, so 5 and 4.
Yes. So it's not like a burning issue for you right now.
No, it'll be 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that you're going to change your perspective on things because of this change, that you've got to start to replan everything, or?
The inheritance tax change is not going to affect the vast majority of farmers so long as they plan for it. but it's going to catch a minority out really badly and probably be the end of their business. So it's one of them things where it's everyone kind of has to stand up for each other, because if it was just left to the people who would actually be badly affected, it's the end of their business. It's like, it's a really serious effect on a very small amount of people.
Okay. Well, that's kind of the way I wanted to do my survey thing, and we'll see what comes off it. I was trying to gauge that. That's a very broad term to go the vast majority.
Well, there's also a really big issue, which is that for almost everyone, even the people who would be badly affected, it might be 10, 15, 20 years until it actually has the effect.
Yes.
But with inflation and with land prices, that £1 million cap is just going to decrease and decrease and decrease in real value.
Yes.
So whilst at the minute a lot of people might, like me, I just said, I'll be fine, we'll get the rest passed over without going over the threshold. The threshold has never been moved. It's going to stay where it is. And if land prices keep increasing, if inflation keeps going, if in 15, 20 years, I could well fall into the bracket where I have to pay tax again. So you might be okay now, but there's a good chance you won't be okay when you actually come to have to pass it on.
Let's go through the rules just for a bit of clarity for anybody who's not entirely sure what's what. So first, because one of the comments we got in the survey was, we need clarity urgently. So there's plenty of people out there who maybe haven't read them or as well versed as you guys are. Disclaimer, we are not financial advisors, and
We may have interpreted this
we'll have
wrong.
questions tonight as to what the rules are, and we won't know the answer. But just the obvious ones for me are, there's no cheeky workarounds. There's no I'm going to sell you the farm for £1. You don't play with the MHMRC, that's not going to fly. And to be clear, the allowance is £1 million per person, is that right? But if you're a couple, you get 2 million for your farm on top of what's normal. So
only if you leave it to your
children.
spouse.
If I die, I can give 1 million to my children.
Yes.
The rest I give to my spouse.
Yes.
When she dies, she can give 1 million, and the rest would have to be on an inheritance tax. However, we also have an individual 325,000 personal allowance, and the farmhouse you're allowed 175 each.
Yeah.
So there's
half
a million in each.
So that's your extra million.
I have £1.5 million. The wife is £1.5 million. If you do it properly through the right steps.
But you will have other assets which you won't think about, like cars and your houses and stuff like that.
Like
So-
it's
your normal inheritance is part of that on top of this farm inheritance.
Yeah, so you're better almost leaving that bit away from the farm, just because a lot of people are going to have a house to pass on or stuff like that.
Yeah. But like the farm, it's the land, the machinery, the buildings, and the livestock. And with inflation and livestock, never mind land, it's not that hard to get into 1 million.
Just out of curiosity, how have you guys structured your farms? Is it like, I know some people run limited companies, some don't.
I'm sole trader.
Sole trader. What's the upsides and downsides to being a limited company, sole trader? How does that work?
Limited company used to be the obvious thing to do like 4 or 5 years ago, but then everyone started doing it and they changed the tax rules to make it less attractive. So now it's pretty much of a muchness whether you're a partnership or a limited company.
Okay.
I'm very glad I stuck to a partnership in hindsight. We were thinking about...
Why?
Because the tax rules leveled up and partnerships are just simpler from a taxation point of view. Spend less in your accounts, easier to take money out of your business, probably easier to pass it on as well.
Have any of you ever looked into the sort of, I know thing can be put into trust and sort of ring fenced that way?
Yeah, but the way I put it is all of the other options to avoid this change to an agricultural property relief are worse than having agricultural property relief.
Yes.
So that is the easy way to explain it.
Yes.
There is other options, but there's a reason that wealthy individuals were buying farmland to pass on their wealth, because it was the best, most efficient way to do it.
One of my questions here, getting back to the spouse rule, there was a comment come into the forms. So the guy had been planning to, he diagnosed ill, leave his family within his pension pot and his farm. His young family would be secure in his absence. He's not so sure that works well now. Is he leaving her a liability or not? Does the whole thing pass to her with the 1 million allowance, or does her name have to be on the farm, for example, to get her 1 million as well? No?
That hasn't been, I asked my accountant about just the wife. He says that hasn't been
nailed down
enough yet.
Right. Aye, so that's a finer detail that hasn't been clarified. So there's a question we don't know the answer to.
But his pension pot now is included in
yes,
the taxation, which is a change.
Oh, it's not. It
is included now, isn't that right?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that.
So moving on then from that to gifting as a means of avoidance, right? What are the rules of gifting your farm to the next generation?
The biggest problem with gifting it is that it is not revalued when you gift it. So if my dad inherited the farm in 1970 and I inherited it off him, then whenever I take it, it's revalued at today's value. So if in 20 years I sell it, I pay capital gains tax on the difference between the value today and the value in 20 years. But if you gift it, it is just transferring the value that my dad got it at in like 1970. So if I sold it in 20 years,
you pay the full capital gains.
It'd be massive. It'd be like 40% of the entire sale because of the difference in the value today versus 50 years ago. So that's the catch with gifting, which makes it not as good as APR.
Okay.
Fed by Farmers had a proper accountant on and he done a fantastic job.
Right. So
I'm just stealing all of his information.
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. You're the man then. The one thing I would add to that is benefit in kind is see if you gift somebody the farmhouse.
They can't have anything to do with it.
They can no longer continue to live in the farmhouse.
No. And if you try to cheat it, HMRC will come and get your money.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just be careful of that one. Transition time frame. What was a comment here was like it seems a bit harsh that anyone who dies in the 7-year period, if they want to do the gifting route.
It's the first 3 years. If you die in the first 3 years, the gifting, it's as if it never happened.
Yeah.
And then it is, I think it's pro rata then the other 4 years.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's some kind of allowance made for this transition now that there should be a gradual wind in, or is there a gradual wind in?
There should be no negotiation, because a change to extending it by 2 years is going to make materially no difference. It's either gone or it's here, because what we're talking about is going to affect people who are going to be badly affected in a decade or in 20 years.
I'm thinking of the guy who, for the sake of the family, was holding it together, and
But you're talking.
And he wants now. He's quite happy to gift it now.
Oh right, now's the time to gift it over.
But you're talking.
But I haven't got 7 years because I might.
I think the.
That's not a victory. That affects like 10 people.
No,
There's some people care though.
I know, but it's not a victory for all the rest of us.
Too late. They haven't done their planning in time because they weren't expecting this. You've got a long time in front of you to do your financial planning. Some people don't.
Well, we just finished it this spring with my father's death. We had just finished it, and
so put yourself in the shoes now where this new law has kicked in, and you've just gone through it. What's the difference?
It wouldn't have affected us. But as Andrew said, with the increase in values going forwards, it is going to affect a lot of people. Our farm was small,
Okay, you below the thresholds.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So the kind of the follow-up question I would have to that is succession planning. Is it better to go early with the transfer or go late? You've gone a little bit earlier to hedge your bets, but what happens if something happens you now at this age by pure fluke and accident?
There's a traditional mentality, and every farmer, as they got older, there was this fear of their children getting divorced and losing half the farm. Yep. And that is why we have such a problem with this at the minute. Andrew's very fortunate his father was willing to sign over the farm.
Yes, that's unusual.
I am
That's very unusual.
I am definitely not one of them people who bang the drum of succession planning. I don't think it actually matters that much. I think, yeah, whenever you reach 60, you should probably have a plan. You should probably think about needing to pass it on. But a lot of people my age are like, we need to get the farm, we need to get the farm. I never felt like that was particularly important. The only reason we done it was because I seen this change coming, and I thought, if we don't do this, we could face a big tax bill. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been that fussed on getting ownership as such.
It wasn't the way, it was you.
Yeah.
You were facing, yeah.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
facing the big
yeah.
tax bill. Yeah.
What boat are you in, Chris?
I think when I was chatting to a few neighbours just about the whole thing when the tax came in, they thought the whole thing's secured up. They're kind of the same position as me. It's in a partnership, 3 generations. It's kind of my grandfather passed on, my father. But a lot of them didn't understand that if something happened, their father unexpectedly, well, that's what they're going to get caught. That my fear was. And then they started to think that, well, how long maybe we're not all right here. They had the farm hand over to the next generation and thought, we're safe here. That'd just be my fear in it. But that's the minority that it's going to affect, is that unexpected death. Mm-hmm. And that's where the majority of farmers need to stand up for them minority. You don't know who it's going to affect. Okay. There is a problem with older farmers not handing it over to you. There is a mentality there that they're going to hold on to the last.
Yeah.
But if you want to miss this tax,
On a personal
inheritance tax, you're going to.
On a personal note, like my dad was 72 when he died. Let me tell you, I would like to think I'll have it done and dusted long before that. Handing the farm over to the next
See,
generation.
that's like, I'm 44 turning.
Yeah.
And, when you're 40, you think, oh, well, I'm still young yet. But like,
Now you're halfway through your life. I'm 52. I'm 3/4 the way through.
you see that 50 approach, and then you're like, flip, I'm 50. And then, you're only 20 years away from 70.
Yeah.
And pretty much 70, anything beyond 70 is overtime, as my father called it the other day. It's not a certainty that you're going to do another decade, that you're going to do another 2 decades. And like, that's where you gotta, do you really want to leave it to your 65, 70 to start into that planning? Do you not want to have your house in order?
The biggest problem is the future of farming is pretty pathetic at the minute. After, especially what has happened, what has been waved in front of farmers this last month or 2 by the government just really makes you feel sick.
It's going to get a lot worse as well.
Yeah.
Definitely. My theory around this inheritance tax change is that it's going to become a test case for whether the Labour government can hold its ground and force through a change, or whether agriculture is going to stand up for itself. And whenever the change was first announced, I didn't think it was that bad. I thought it could have been worse. The vast majority of people would have got around it. But it gathered so much momentum from the farming industry and from people lobbying and from the NFU that it was kind of like, it just became this moment of, it's either going to go one of 2 ways. Either the government backs down, or the government takes a lesson from it that they can push through changes on farmers and they get away with it. So, I mean, the government's only standing to gain about 350 million a year from this change. It's a tiny amount of money in the grand scheme of things.
In the grand scheme of the billions,
yes,
we're
and
going to borrow.
it has distracted from every other massive tax policy change they made. It has taken so much heat, and it's a tiny change compared to the 20-something billion they raised by changing NIC for businesses.
So, to play devil's advocate, is it deliberately a distraction from something else? Or is it the test case to do more to agriculture?
I think both. And if you were a Labour government and you were coming up with a budget, that would be a really smart move. Make a change where if you absolutely have to, you can reverse it and it won't cost you a lot of money. It hides all your other massive tax policy changes which affect everyone else. And it also gives you information on whether farmers are going to accept some of the policy ambitions you have for the next 5 years. It does make sense, which is why it's became the big issue. But the problem with it being a big issue is, for someone in the public to understand it, you have to explain it to them. There's no 3-word soundbite that you can get the message across, because you're talking about people who own over £1 million of assets. It's not a great message for the public.
So go back to the trolls, every comment is just pay your taxes like everybody else.
Yeah, but whenever you sit down and explain it to them, every single person who wrote them comments will see your point of view. If you explain it to someone that this is an asset that's been in like a family farm of 4 generations, that the farmer never sees any of the money, and all they're asking for is to be able to pass it on to the next generation so that they can keep farming. And it is family farms that are the ones who are going to suffer from this, that is generational assets. And I think then the public sees a different point of view. But it's so hard to explain it, that it's a bad issue to try and fight.
Do you think the public even care?
They do. The public want food that comes from family farms.
Do they?
Yes.
Yeah, they do. Listen, if you're talking about sausages from foreign countries
Yes.
that aren't produced anywhere near to the same level of traceability as here, a lot of the people will opt for the
If it's the same
guaranteed
price.
quality.
People,
They
prices
will
king.
pay a premium, but whether
They have to be close. They have to be similar in price.
Yeah, similar in
Small
price.
margin. They'll pay a small margin for the good stuff.
A lot of times I don't think they even will pay a premium. But everything we produce in this country is at world market prices.
That's probably my biggest issue with the industry is like, what's your opinions on setting the price point? Because from having owned the business, my perspective is any costs I absorb, I eventually pass on to my customers. Like every other business out there, I just have to make a profit to keep my staff employed. You can't set the price of your product at the sheep level and at the cow level and at the milk level.
Price takers.
You can't control any of that.
Price takers.
It's an example of perfect competition. You have an unlimited number of willing suppliers of a uniform product.
How do you fix that?
You can't fix that.
Why not?
You have a perishable good, I suppose, and you have to.
Because
If you don't want it this week, it's just not going to be worth anything next week, and it's going to cost you more to keep it. Even like your beef animal, like I'm going to feed it an extra £10-15 a meal to keep another week and take the same price. So the supermarket's not going to give me any more for it.
Surely there's a more.
The big issue of why farmers are being bashed so hard, in my opinion, is they are such a small percentage of the population. And the general population has lost touch of the fact that 100 years ago a farmer fed maybe 4 or 5 people, and now a farmer could be feeding 150 or 250 people. And our government, I think, is starting to believe that some of their previous advisors have announced we don't need farmers, but like they think they've just have to get rid of another 100,000 farmers, and like there isn't that much more than that left maybe in the UK. You get rid of 100,000, that doesn't sound a big number, but that's the whole farming industry now, whereas 100 years ago there would have been several million farmers. There is this romantic notion that if you have 20 acres that you can make a viable farm. That's not. I own 60 odd, but we farm 300. And in the winter time, we take winter keep for our sheep. We have another 600-700 acres to graze the sheep on. And like, for me, just to run 800 ewes, you have to have access of 1,000 acres for winter keep and the summer, and like 800 ewes would struggle to keep a house. And
So like pure. Let's go to viable farm value, right? Let's go sheep first. Pure sheep farm that'll keep the family. It'll pay the bills. You'll have a reasonable lifestyle and able to invest in your farm.
how many hours is he going to be working?
And he's going to have a lifestyle. He's going to do a FarmTheory 40-hour week.
I would forget about it.
Impossible. I was going to say that too. It's not possible.
Lambing time.
If you owned the land, if you owned all the land, and you were able just to have the sheep and have a shepherd in and the staff to help.
If I just owned the land, I'd set it to a dairy farmer. End of story.
Smart man.
right, sheep farming is just not viable.
Sheep farm on its own, if you owned all your land, yes. But now, if you rent land and the government's going to reduce your single farm payment, keep reducing subsidies, that's just
The
going to
reason
leave
I asked
it
the question is to
unviable.
put a number on it for like if you were that guy right now and the inheritance tax was due on that farm, what would the bill be? Is that a £5 million farm? Is that a £10 million farm?
Acres you're probably getting up into that, but if you have that land, you won't be farming sheep.
Fair enough, right.
You won't be farming sheep.
Dairy. What does a viable dairy farm look like right now? You're able to own your own ground, live a 40 hour a week lifestyle,
200 acres.
and invest in the farm.
I'd actually say it's a wee
200,
bit
yeah.
higher. I'd say probably 250, 300.
Oh, well, we were 320, but I think you do it less. We have 180, but you could make a living if you owned everything. You could make a living up 80 cows.
And that pays the staff to support you while you do your 40 hours.
Yeah.
But that's fully inherited, and there's very few.
Oh, if you had the
Very-
bias, forget
Or
about it.
even rent.
What's the value of that farm?
Probably like 5 million. More
Okay.
probably, but say that.
Suckler, if I had to do this with sucklers, and let's amp the numbers up, how many acres do we need? How many cattle do we need?
20,000 acres.
I'd say that. No, you definitely, I'd know, you'd want 200 suck cows. I don't know what sort of size of farm you'd want, but
But you
the margins in suck cows, I don't see how you do it.
Yeah.
Like, we have a small number of them now, but we need everything else alongside it to make it viable.
You'd actually have a better chance with your dairy beef than your suck cow.
Yeah, probably
So
would.
let's go dairy beef then. Is dairy beef a very similar setup to just straight dairy?
Still need another job.
I would say you're probably into 500-600 acres.
It's easier just to say not viable.
Everything's viable if you've got enough land,
But if you have that much land, why not just rent the land, make a fortune, and not have to work?
because they're no longer an active farmer and you don't get inheritance tax benefits.
This is what I'm telling
you
you.
don't
You
get that
see all
anymore.
these small farms that we're doing work for. They generally, listen, 30 years ago, a guy could probably scrape by with a wee bit of social welfare or whatever, scrape by with a 30-acre farm and could get by. He owned it, he might have rented it a wee bit up the road, whatever, but he could get by, but those days are gone. But that guy was a full-time farmer, he had no debt whatsoever, lived like a pauper, and he was happy. The next generation was a part-time farmer, and the following generation's a no-time farmer. And that's where farming is, in my eyes, in the more rural, from Anna where myself and Chris is, there's a lot of smaller farmers. Like the farms down there are made up from farms that were 25 acres or 20 acres 100 years ago. And they've gradually amalgamated up into bigger farmers buying them.
The land, right? Are we saying the land is going to remain in food production under this direction, or is it going to be used for other things?
No, it's going to be used for other things.
It'll be rewilded. The bogs will have their drains blocked up again. There'll be trees planted at the edges of fields.
They'll talk about carbon sinks and everything.
Carbon sinks, yeah.
Solar farms?
Solar farms will be a huge swell of land. There will obviously still be food production. And it's not going to be that people are forced out of their farms, like someone shows up and says, you must leave immediately, we need this for solar farms. But people are just going to get so fed up with the lack of money, the regulation, that they're just going to not want to keep farming.
And they're going to just cash out one by one.
Cash out one by one. And if you look at the numbers of people leaving the dairy industry, for example, even though it has been really pretty profitable for the last 3 years, the rate of exit has increased in speed.
So I got a quote here off of the survey again. A guy had a theory. The whole thing is like dairy heifers sold in the market. One heifer makes 3,000, so that's the price. There's a headline figure and everyone's running with it. Personally, I think it will cool the land market, which in turn will bring the land values down and in effect mean less tax will be due. Agree or disagree?
Absolutely disagree.
They're not making any more land.
There's no point, there's only maybe one example whenever the interest rates went mental in like 1993, where land price went backwards for like 2 years. Otherwise, it's never happened. So
It will take less attraction for people to buy land, business people to buy land, to avoid inheritance, to pass it on to the
but
next.
it's still probably the best option for them.
It's still an option.
So
Just
as
not
a
as
percentage
favourable.
of your own areas then, what percentage of the land sold in the last 10 years went to AD and went to businessmen who are using it for that vehicle purposes and went to genuine farmers?
UK-wide, last year, 55% of land sales were to non-farmers. In Northern Ireland, and this is anecdotal, I don't have a figure for this, but I was speaking to an estate agent like probably a year ago, and he said like almost all land sales were not to farmers last year around this area. It's just not, if a farmer is buying land, they are doing it out of the profit of their business. It's not a smart business decision.
You
Cannot
can
make
rent
sense.
land for less
Than the interest. Yeah.
on buying land. Hence, I rent land.
Yes.
Right.
Just doesn't make sense.
Just
to buy
doesn't
it.
make sense.
But the issue of renting land is, at the end of 30 years, you no longer have a sustainable business. So I'm losing 50 acres to the A5 that I rent. I've rented for like 30 years. And there's literally like nowhere to get land to rent. Even if I wanted to pay £350, £400 an acre, I'd probably be outbid on it. So that is...
You're forced into downsizing.
That is a real world example of what's going to happen to more and more people, is that you'll be forced into downsizing. Food production will be dropped and it will be replaced with energy production, stuff like that, which is not owned by family businesses. It's owned by businesses which have a 10 million or 20 million pound AD plant.
There'll be more available to rent, but there'll be...
Also, farmers have to be the only people in the world who own an asset and actively want it to be worth less. It makes no sense to be pinning your hope on your asset being worth less. Because
But
even if you
yes
save
and no,
on tax,
yes and no.
even,
I'd argue there. I'd argue
even
there.
if you save on the tax,
You all claim that you do not want to let it go, and you're passing generation to generation. So you don't care if it's actually worth less. It's worth more to
I haven't
you.
decided whether I let my children suffer through farming for like contracting. No, it's not going to the next generation unless there's an awful change around. But the farming,
this is a
I
huge
don't.
thing.
I don't really know if you would you really want your children to suffer.
See, that
It's
is,
getting worse.
you're spot on. See people who work 100 hours a week for their entire lives, right? And they get nothing out of it, okay? Why would they encourage their children to do
do the
that?
same.
If their children could go and get a well-paid job.
You were those children. All of you.
I have 40 A levels and a degree, but I just made damn poor employment choices.
Life choices, poor
Yeah,
life
but that's
choices.
it.
But did your dad encourage you to farm?
No, he didn't want me to come home and farm. He wanted he wanted me to go and do engineering.
We're the exceptions. There's plenty of people of your generation who probably didn't come home to farm and went and done something else.
Yeah, but we had our 20-year-old school reunion and 20-year school reunion, and a lot of them went to uni across the water, got jobs across the water, and see, as soon as kids came along, they all want to move back, but they were qualified and stuff. You couldn't get jobs in Fermanagh or Tyrone, so like that's. But they quite liked to be back with their parents. I was very fortunate until my father died. Apart from when I was at uni, I seen him every day, and that's nice to see your parents. You'd see your parents every day.
I don't know if it's nice, but I do.
So what would you trade? What would you trade it for? Seeing your parents day and daily.
But that's the
you've
family.
got to work an
That's the
80-hour
family.
week to do it, versus working a 40-hour week, but you only see them 3 times a year.
Farming is like your entire life. Like it's not
That
your
is my
job.
life.
It's not
That
a
is my
job.
life.
People say it's a lifestyle. I'd say it's for me, it's more of a job probably. Like I never wanted to farm. I'm an exception.
Why are you farming?
Because it was like
It's good for TikToks.
yeah, it's a good job. It is a good job. But if I hadn't inherited a £4 or £5 million farm, there's no way I would have done it.
Yeah, you wouldn't have borrowed the money to do it.
No, not a chance. Not a chance.
But you couldn't borrow the money to start that.
Oh,
No.
you
But
could.
you'd spend your whole
You could,
life.
but you'd be working like
A
me.
£5 million farm goes on the market. Can I go to a bank and borrow £5 million and pay that down in my lifetime?
Not unless you get the bank manager on drugs, no. At the minute, the bank manager wouldn't lend you.
Without any external income, probably not.
So it is an industry nobody can get into.
It's a dying industry.
This is why no one can relate to what you're living through.
But it's been like this this is not new. Like
John, for somebody to build up a fund, there is new entrants, but
most of them
they
are
do
suckler
not
herds
they
and
do
stuff.
not find the reward. It's the next generation.
Yeah.
This is why we're miffed about the change in the policy. This generation works hard to try and make it easier for the next generation, which is basically over this last 40 years is to try and accumulate access to more land, be it through buying or renting. Even whenever our father died, a lot of the land we rented, we got first refusal. And we have still rented some of it on to keep our farm businesses, myself and my brother, keep them viable. If we dropped them farms and somebody else rented them, you can't go the next year and get them back, because that's, people tend to build, there's a certain relationship between landowners and tenants. And if it's not smooth, it's not going to work.
But like a power station, hard to start, hard to grow, hard to stop, hard to restart.
Yes, but it's easier to keep, that's very good. It's easier to keep a farm rolling through generations than stop, start. You don't do that. Like even the livestock end of it, the breeding, like if you're wiped out to TB, you will be a real pantomime to listen to for the 5 years to get your cows back to where you had them. And you'd be lucky to do it in 5 years. It could take 10 years of your life actually to get back where you were before TB wipes you out.
Okay.
It's another great example of something which isn't profit, but it's going to put people out of business, because there's just such a strain on having to deal with it like every 6 months. And yet the people who are meant to be like in government, meant to be making smart decisions, just do not care one bit.
Well, the badgers care more, and so they care more about
Yes.
badgers in some areas of the UK than they do about farmers.
It's mental.
What's been your take on the media in terms of, it's grand the public having a perception of you? What's the media's perception?
Nobody has
of
actually
you?
explained, back to what we've discussed earlier, a viable farm. The general public is that out of touch of what it takes to actually run a farm, and they're so out of touch, and the Farmers Union has made no attempt to rectify that over this last 20 years. And this isn't the first big problem. There's just endless problems coming at farmers, one after the other, just one after the other at the minute. And it really does feel as if you're being picked on. And the fact that the number of farmers in the UK has dropped down to such a small percentage of the population, we're being backed into corners. It feels like that.
The one body that you have, the NFU, what is your opinion on the NFU? And I want an answer from all of you.
The NFU,
Each one at a time.
The NFU, in my opinion, is...
Are we including the UFU in this?
Yes.
Yes,
It's
it's
not-
all
no, you
one.
explain that to me. It's basically the same thing or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, close enough.
The NFU has turned into a soft lobby group, and the best way for me to give my impression of them at the minute is it's like sending Dad's army to D-Day.
That is an excellent way to put it.
So does Barry represent you two?
He represents the majority of farmers. That's the
No,
fact.
don't I talk too much and say you're
No, but
Specifically on that question, have you anything that you feel differently about
No,
about
the UFU is no longer hard lobbying. I know they have to work alongside the government to a certain level, but as somebody said, and I thought it very good, somebody said in one of your comments, the NFU, all they've got good for is insurance and handing out teas and bones.
there's always this issue is the same in politics, and it's the same in I'm going to say the NFU to keep me out of trouble with the UFU, but you can figure out if it's the same whether you want or not. But if you spend 30 years of your life going to events, like climbing the ladder within the NFU, and you get to the top, okay, and you're serving a term of 3 or 4 years, you're 100% thinking about what you're going to do after it and how you use what you've done for 30 years of your life to further your career. Mm-hmm. So you're not willing to burn every bridge you have over a small issue.
So you think the internal structure of that, it sort of forces them to act like politicians internally?
Yes, which I would do as well if I was in their position.
They are being paid to go to these meetings. We aren't. If any farmer goes to a meeting, it costs him money. It costs him either to pay staff extra to cover when he's out of the farm, or it costs him also to actually get there. These people you're talking about, the NFU, they're all being paid. That's their job. They're being paid to do it. You know, they're just not making a horrid good job of it in some of our opinions.
So you've got a bit of a hole right now you're facing, and someone has to lead the charge on, that messaging you want in the public domain of the great things farmers are doing. Is it a case
The plus
of sorting the NFU out from within and making that your body, or is it a case of start again?
The farmers elect the entire NFU from every layer. It's elected by farmers.
Right.
They also have a lot of money sitting there to be used for a rainy day that they never use. Farmers who are like me and you, who are like working all day and say they don't have time to go to NFU meetings, they need to start going to NFU meetings and start electing actual people who represent them. And that's how you actually change the structure.
Is that though a bit like the politicians? Is like every election, it's the same old faces that are standing.
Yes,
how do you bring that fresh blood within?
Because people need to show up to the meetings. You do have no credibility to complain about our unions if you never go to a union meeting.
Well, it is the same people goes to meetings every day.
Yes, but then people who never go, people
The
who
people
actually
that go
work hard.
are the older generation that have handed it on
Correct.
to their
They're
children.
not the active, busy farmers who also have the most need to be represented.
But
properly.
the one plus side to the farmers union, they are paid and they're slightly more impartial. Whereas if you put actual farmers in, a dairy farmer will tend to
signal his own
sector, and you know.
Do you think all farmers agree with you that the NFU is still going to be the body to be that voice, that it can be fixed?
It doesn't matter if they don't agree, they're not going to be able to form a new union.
Why not?
Because farming is already hard enough to unite behind the existing unions. And people have tried it a few times before. You had like the British Farming Union or Farmers for Action here, and they've never went anywhere. So look at history.
It's just a pity that you can see all the unions sorting out, like the doctors, the nurses and all that. Like they really did push and they got something done for them all.
My wife's in a union and she had like a meeting once a year with her union rep about what the union's done, what's her opinion, and she's just a normal member. I think our farming unions have never put a value either on the fact that they actually have a membership.
They've assumed we'll always be there.
They've assumed you'll always be there. And the membership rates are appalling. In Northern Ireland, it's like just over 50%. In Germany, where they actually defeated their government on their policy last January, 95% of farmers were in the union. And of the 95%, 90% showed up to some form of an event. Like, they have actually made a culture where being part of a union matters.
Was there not a system in France where you had to buy the French product first?
Well, they have really clear labelling laws in France now where it says country of origin on the product really clearly.
But there's no legal requirement for them to consume the French produce at a farm
But they're probably
level.
brought up to do that. A lot of the pride. It's like American pride in their own produce as well.
The French also have way less regulations, way less. And that makes a big difference.
How is that possible? Has that still been within the European Union? There's a lot
Because
of
they're the biggest
regulations.
agricultural entity in the EU.
And their farmers are incredibly united and they have a very strong public support behind them. So if the French government tries anything, that just doesn't work for them.
Well, that's the thing people love to chuck in the comments. It's like, if we're in France,
Yeah, but what people don't appreciate is that it doesn't just happen. Like that kind of unity amongst farmers.
Takes a lot of organisation to.
That's generations of that. Generations of
And
that.
we don't have that here. So, but we
And
need.
you can't just flick a switch and
If
turn
we
it on.
took the French approach, we're thugs.
It's not
That's all
bad.
we're
It's
saying
that
is
farmers
thugs.
wouldn't show up. There's no sense. Farming is very competitive in the UK and Northern Ireland. It's not a unified group of people.
Well, I would say when it comes to people talk about strikes, there's quite a few farmers like myself do that many hours to actually get off the farm and go and stand on the street and protest for 6 or 8 hours. They don't have that time. If they do that, there's welfare issues back at home, with livestock farms and that.
Yeah.
And
your farm can't afford that kind of loss.
no, we can't afford that loss. Now, there's certain times the dairy farmers are making a better margin. This time last year, they weren't. They had an awful bad time this time. They were the more milk they produced, the more money they lost. If they're going to talk about strikes and stop supplying food to the supermarkets, that's all right for a tillage farmer. He can keep his grain. It can sit in the store for a month. It doesn't get any the worse. Andrew's milk If it's collected every day or every second day, it's wasted. That's it. And the financial loss for that, you just can't, the margin's not in the business to do that.
There could be a silver lining, which is that an oppressed people, which is basically what farmers are at this point, tend to unify.
Yeah.
And if you have a common enemy, it's amazingly good at unifying a group of different people.
Now listen, the problem is if we're less than 1% and
But
who is the enemy? If it's the rest of the population, we're a wee bit outnumbered here.
The public 100%, the vast majority, support farmers.
Well, this is the first protest I've seen or talk about it that actually every farmer's talking about. You know, there's been protests over the years and you never hear. Some farmers talk about it, but they don't do anything about it.
It has unified.
Yeah, it seems to have brought more people together.
Yes. Well, this is why.
That's because our backs are against the wall.
Exactly. We're an oppressed people.
That said, even if the industry, UK and Ireland wide, even if they want to unify, what Barry has explained there, took a minute ago, is that logistically, you can't implement that level of sustained standing on the side of the road going, I'm protesting.
Yeah, but I think the whole standing at the side of the road thing with a placard is a very inefficient way to get change. What we need to learn from is the environmental lobby, the people who have massively changed government policy through a very small group of people and getting like their message out there.
Give me an example of good tactics they employed.
Good tactics is hard, but
Successful, so-called successful tactics they employed then.
What is it? The WEF? No, how can I remember this? What used to be called the fighting? WWE.
Oh, wrestling?
Yes, but they changed the name. They're the environmental group, okay? And they were trying to change public opinion to get their priorities for the environment put forward, but they had very little success. So instead, what they done was they went to the retailers and they sold the retailers on their vision, which was then the basis for the red tractor, greener farm commitment. So a small group of lobbyists who couldn't change public opinion, so they were smart about it, and instead bypassed the politicians, went to retailers, and they managed to almost get it passed so that every farmer would have to follow their agenda.
So what you're saying is you need the unity of farmers to get behind a massive marketing campaign.
There's smarter ways to do it than you don't have to stand at the side of a road.
I think we have to be careful that we don't alienate ourselves from the general population.
So another example in real life, right, is what me and Chris/Jack what we do.
Chris, who identifies as Jack.
Yes, it's 2024, that's very modern. But what we do is we make the public connect farming with us. The biggest value that anyone can provide is that they have in their head someone that they associate on a personal level with farming. Because the vast majority of the population no longer have any link in their history to a farmer.
Yes.
So it is so easy for the media to say something negative about us and for them to believe it.
Yeah.
But
I'll give you an analogy. When you think of a Christian,
yes,
you immediately think a Bible bashing whoever that once sort of said something to you that pissed you off or caught you for money or something. You think, them hypocrites.
But if you know one.
But if you actually know a genuine Christian who tries to live like a good person and then you know
with
that
Christian beliefs,
you're willing to accept they're not perfect.
Yes.
I get you, yeah. You're right.
So that's you
need the personal connection.
It's just a personal connection. You can do a lot with public perception, politics, marketing. You can do an awful lot with a relatively small amount of people if they all have a single goal and they're motivated to go there.
Yeah, focused.
And history will tell you that. People are now getting their information from a totally different source, and it's a source which farmers can have an actual impact in.
I couldn't tell you the last time I watched the news.
No one does. There is now a minority.
COVID finished that.
A minority of the UK population that watches TV. A minority. Of young people under 35, that means we're still young, I think. Only 11% of them.
That makes us old, Barry.
11% of them watch TV once a week. Here's a great message which the fake news of this world would never deliver, but farmers can deliver, which is that whenever food prices went crazy for the last 2 or 3 years, Farmers have not seen any
penny of it.
amount of that,
No.
but the retailers and the supermarkets have seen record profits.
Massive.
So you have the likes of Tesco's coming out and saying that they care about their consumers and they care that there's a huge food inflation and they're struggling. And whilst they say that, they double their profits. And the farmers take the same amount of money. That is such a good story to educate the public with. Essentially, social media is becoming the voice of farmers. And if you doubt that, look at how many people are going to show up to Ollie Blog's protest on Tuesday, and look at how many are going to go to the NFU protest.
So that's the thing we're leading on to, I guess, is like there's 3 events on next week. There's the one in Northern Ireland on Monday night, which is UFU run. You have the NFU putting 1,800 people into London, and then you've got Ollie Blogs.
Yeah.
Of all 3 events, what are we achieving next week with that?
The UFU event, I'll just give you my personal, what went through my head, was that I thought it was a stupid idea, but then I realised no one was going to go to it. And that would be really bad because we'd look incredibly weak. So I changed my opinion and was like, okay, this actually is important, that a lot of people show up and that the politicians who are there.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how important?
It could very well be a 10 if it was done correctly. I am petrified now that we're going to all show up in our thousands and we're going to listen to politicians saying watery, empty words. And the politicians are going to leave happy and the farmers are going to leave angry. And that if that happens, this has went from being something which is positive to something which is incredibly negative. And I am very worried about it.
Are you all planning to go?
Yeah. I think a lot of people will be there.
I started off, yes, good idea. Then I thought, no. I am back thinking yes, but it's this is the effort.
What was the flip-flopping about?
Speaking to a few people, and they suggested this is phase 1 to assess farmers' commitment to it.
Yeah.
And that it's.
Did you change your mind over the weekend, or how recently? Last?
It was not before the weekend.
I think there's a lot more momentum behind it.
But really, the Econ Centre, this is only group building, and there's going to be very little to come out of this.
But then the risk is, if we don't hear what we want to hear, it's going to have the opposite effect, and you're going to have a lot of angry farmers.
Yeah. I think in general, the likes of myself, we're going to give the Farmers Union a chance.
Yeah.
See what they can come up with, and if it's not, it'll be people like Andrew on Ollie Blogs, whatever, that it'll get social media involved, and we will have to do something.
So you want to see a lot of venting from the floor on Monday night?
If they let us speak.
Oh, they are.
Yeah, but I don't want it from farmers. I don't want it from farmers.
They'll all ask
I'm
the
not
same
saying.
question
I'm not
10
saying
times.
anything. I'm not saying anything.
So who do you want in the talking?
We have leaders of those farmers.
That's where you need a real strong voice coming from the leaders to show that they're not willing to roll over.
But they're going there to do John's job. They're going there to keep everybody, they feel that everybody's had a say, and then they're going to go home and take tea and buns before they go home, and that'll be it.
That's a catastrophe.
Well, that's what's going to happen.
I know nothing about the union or the people in the union. Nothing.
I'll give you a quick summary. Fantastic people, genuinely fantastic people. They work really, really hard, right? Every single member of staff, and no, not every single member. Most members of staff are actually brilliant, okay? But they don't know how to say no. And that's the biggest problem.
Are you just missing the one person to sink the teeth in and be the bad
Yes,
cop?
100%, 100%.
I think people have to learn, if they want to keep their farming businesses, they're going to have to suck up a few wee things they don't like about somebody to try and let one person steer this boat where it needs to be going. That you have to get together and...
Farmers are desperate for someone to lead them.
Yeah.
I think we need Barry as the leader, but maybe he's not. Maybe he's not flowers in the week.
involved in anything.
You can get rid of your sheep.
That's no good.
You said you're too old for dairy
We'll
farm.
pay you a good
No, I
salary.
like my sheep because whenever they do something I don't like, then you send them to
A
the factory.
Fermanagh man would be great. There's no one can chat like a Fermanagh man.
Vermont men can talk, that's for sure. They can talk. Surely you need a leader that's got teeth, and you need a new, fresh, national marketing campaign that's going to be sustained for the next 5 years.
The problem is to get people that have the broad spectrum of knowledge for all aspects of agriculture. There are very few of them, and anybody that is that way orientated, they have more brains to stand up and
there is
try and
plenty
fight
of
for
money
us.
out there. Like a lot of we all pay for the Dairy Council, and we pay into like research organisations. In my opinion, way smarter use of that money would be taking it to turn it to marketing, to try and turn public perception and counter the negative narratives, and make some sort of positive narratives for farming.
To be fair, I think you are all on social media. That's all starting to.
It's going to have a huge
it's
impact.
too slow to see.
The reason I say it can't, I suspect it may not be able to achieve it just through the influencer kind of wave that's come through. Would be that you watch those farming influencers. If you already love farming, if you already got that addiction, you're like, oh, I want to find out what way he milks his cows or whatever. I feel it probably needs another layer on top of that. It's an actual concerted campaign to get back into primary schools that aren't rural primary schools, to explain where food comes from and explain how we're on an island and you know, food security is a thing. Do you remember this old war that we had a long time ago?
Yes.
That's when the farming kind of blossomed. There's so much of that, but like next week there's also the stuff happening in London. You know, what's Ollie achieving with taking people down to physically to London? Is that more effective than what we're doing? And you know, we're doing it on a basis of, well, we want to unify farmers. Is that really what they're achieving next week too?
I don't think Labour will roll back on the change. I think they'll make a tiny tweak, and then the farming unions will be happy to have an off ramp, and they'll claim it's a victory, and everyone will leave unhappy.
But this is the first of 4 years of policy changes.
Yes, but if farmers don't leave happy, the next time they're asked to go to something, they'll just not bother.
How do we make Monday into something constructive? You know, how do we leave it that even if they go away from Monday night unhappy, that the next time you need them to turn up, they will turn up?
Farmers need to leave Monday night thinking that was a great event and we had our voices heard. And every politician who shows up there needs to leave extremely unhappy. The priority is not to keep our politicians happy or say what we think they want to hear. It's to have every farmer who goes there feel like it was worth their time.
Are our own politicians not a little bit toothless in this fight as well?
Yeah, totally.
They've got no votes. They've got this massive majority they're up against. You know,
Yeah,
can they really move the needle?
This is nothing. Like Monday night really has almost nothing to do with inheritance tax. Monday night is about stormont and policy decisions taken there in the next few years. That's the only reason why I think people should go. It's really nothing to do with inheritance tax. The Labour government sitting in Westminster doesn't care what happens on Monday night.
So if it's not about inheritance tax, what topics do you want really on the table?
Farmers need to feel like when they show up, it was worth their time, and when they're asked to show up again, they will actually come back.
I think it's back to what you said at the start. Farmers want to be left alone to get on with their job and not to be the target, seen as a soft target. We are a soft target and we need somebody to stand up for us. And as Andrew said, we're quite happy to pay for it. We already have paid enough that we should be having this, but the Farmers Union in times like this is not fit for purpose at the minute. It needs to get, as you say, teeth to actually
That's the expectation of the majority of people who are going on Monday night.
I have no expectation. I'm going and whatever happens, happens. But I would be disappointed if there's not a bit of an
expectation leads to disappointment. I just want to say it out
loud.
That's the risk.
Yeah. But the farmers need to leave, whether they're happy about the night or not. In my opinion, the farmers have to leave Monday night more cohesive as a group than they went in.
How do we take Monday night and build that unity at the grassroots? You know, what can we do? Is it just a case of the fact that we all showed up? That's a win. Do we take away from Monday night and say, look at the number of people that showed up? That is a win.
I have been saying for like a year now that something that the Ulster Farmers Union should be doing is putting red lines in the sand. Like, for example, cuts TV compensation And going out there and making every member of the Farmers Union aware that this is a red line and that it's not going to be acceptable, and putting some effort into preparing people that they might have to fight to prevent things that are going to really damage them, and building a sense of like an actual union, like unity amongst farmers, and having events that is not focused on just the people in the group of the Ulster Farmers Union in this area, but having events which is meant to attract people who have never went to an Ulster Farmers Union event, to try and get them engaged.
I have no interest in going to Monday night and it being a glorified self-praise by the Farmers Union of how great farmers are. I want the Farmers Union to stand up and say, right, we understand you're disappointed with where farming is at the minute. We are going to do A, B and C to try and bring it forwards, but we need your support.
Yeah.
And I want all the farmers to go, yeah, we'll help. We'll do that. But like if they just go and tell us how great we are and they'll do their bit if they can, that's pointless.
Or if they
I've heard
stand
it all
up
before.
and explain how inheritance tax changes might affect people as if they're talking to the politicians. Every farmer knows that. The farmers don't want to hear that
But
either.
it is back to what you said, Jonathan. This isn't really, it is about inheritance tax, but it's behind it.
There's a lot more.
There's a lot more.
For that one issue, there's 10 or 15 more big issues
As
behind
you
it.
said, this was the straw that broke the camel's back, and this just happens to be the issue which led to this.
But it's the fact that farmers have, this last 20, 30 years, they have taken penalties from governments and the Department of Agriculture. They have taken it on a personal level and they carried it with their own shoulders. That money went out of their bank account gradually because they've got this penalised or that has been deducted. The difference for me this time is that the government, I'm happy to stand up for myself, but I find it a disgrace that I have to stand up for my children who are 16, 14 and 10 over this. That's where I feel it's my children's future. And I want them to have the option that if they do want to continue, they have a great interest in farming. And I want them to have that option whenever they get to that age. And that for me is what Monday night's about.
Well, you need a strong voice from the Farmers Union, but you do need the farmers to get behind them if they're willing to do that.
But the Farmers Union, to be fair, Monday night, I don't think they realise. They think this is about inheritance tax. I don't think they realise.
Oh, I've warned them, don't worry.
I don't think they realise just the depth of discontent.
Yeah.
As you say, it is just a thing that happened to be up the topic at the time whenever.
Yeah. It was going to happen at some point regardless, yeah.
Yeah, and it's the fact, it's the first time I've actually seen farmers from Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland all really peed off with what the government has said.
And I would actually
I mean every farmer.
I would actually say that, and like this might be a bit of a strange opinion, but I think the momentum has actually overtaken the issue.
Yes.
It's an outlet, an event for what farmers have been feeling for like.
It's the catalyst.
It's the catalyst
to solve farming's last 20, 30 years of problems. With this, and we have got into such a small number of farmers. If we don't do it soon,
it's too late.
It's too late.
You're spot on. I think the longer term future is going to be a political solution, and for farming to matter politically, it has to have a wide range of public support. So it has to be a positive message if you want to get public support.
Surely it only matters if it means votes for politicians, if they're in charge.
Exactly.
The frustration I would experience with politics here is
it's all green and
our
orange.
MPs haven't got enough volume to really make a difference in Westminster.
The bigger issues are Stormont. Westminster issues are minor for farming compared to what's coming from Stormont.
Okay.
So it will be local MPs or
But surely that
MLAs.
food security, that's pushing back on the supermarkets, that has to come at a national level. Like, this, you're talking about unity of farmers. Like right now, you're saying it's a good thing that
food
there's unity with.
food security issue is not.
But you see, Andrew, the problem I would have with your statement there is Northern Ireland dairy farmers depend on mainland UK for their milk market. We produce far more milk in Northern Ireland than we use. A lot of it's exported to mainland UK.
Like, surely you've got to put the squeeze onto the politicians at Stormont from the top. not from.
But I mean,
local.
agriculture's devolved to the regions.
But they can still.
Westminster essentially has no influence over what Andrew Murr decides to do within the Department of Agriculture.
But if we're talking about like, let's fix the problem with a clean sheet, that doesn't solve. That doesn't solve your English farmers' problem. It doesn't solve your
There's
Welsh
not
farmers'
even a
problem.
problem to be fixed. It's just farmers want to be left alone. It's like, just stop trying to force stuff onto us. Just leave us alone. It's not like we're particularly asking for anything to be rolled back.
Yes, but
It's literally just.
you said that the solution was a political one.
Yeah.
But the power has been devolved.
Yep.
So that means it has to be solved in the Welsh Parliament, it has to be solved in the Scottish, has to be solved in Stormont.
In the short term, that's true. Long term, it has to be solved at Westminster. A great example.
Right. So you better start with the
Local.
the small one
Local.
or the big one.
Small win.
I think this is the big one. I think it's the unity, because
This is the one time you may get the unity across.
this it's
nation.
because there's so few farmers left.
Yes, good idea.
That's
a numbers game.
It's a numbers game.
Like you can't fund that campaign to be significant without the weight of the numbers across the board. You know, the local guys, are they just going to chip up and solve the problem locally?
Like, as I said earlier, it's not just the government, it's also the supermarkets. The supermarkets are UK wide, the government is UK wide. They are the stem of a lot of our problems, and this is where we have to
And your
stand up.
grassroots
We have
public
to
marketing
stand up.
campaign is a lot easier to be effective to, you know, apply the tactics nationally and have a mood swing, I would argue, than to have that just happen. If you look at the UK as a whole, you look at the States, you know, you're looking at red or blue. Like, it's like there is no other shade. How do you take one of those parties and steer them
It's left or right.
into what you want, which is, you know, common sense farming, low admin, food security, common sense over carbon emissions.
Well,
blah,
here's
blah, blah, blah,
an
blah.
example of what will come from Tuesday is that the Conservative Party and Reform UK, who are probably on the right, have jumped on the pro-farming bandwagon around this, and they're using this as for their own political ends, but it is them political parties fundamentally saying we support our farmers. So it's in their own interest to support farming, but it's also in farmers' interest.
How do you hold those politicians to account though on those promises? Because how many months is it since Keir Starmer stood and said family farms
But look how much
He wouldn't touch
press.
them, and sure, he's now obliterating them.
can't be restarted?
But look how much bad press he has got. Almost the vast majority want you to be farming with your sheep on your hill
Yeah.
and passing it on to your children. That is the perfect story that the public want.
Labour's in here, you look at what has happened to Democrats. We're just going to have to suffer
There
through 4
is-
years of
There
torture.
will be a swing back.
Yeah.
And farmers need to be ready to capitalise on that and make sure that whoever...
The problem is, Andrew, I don't think enough farmers will be left in business by that time.
I don't disagree, yeah. It's a very depressing industry to be in.
The juice is no longer worth the squeeze.
Yeah, that's, yeah. I mean, for me, like, I find that a lot of people our age, like, have no real desire to push on and expand their business. Whereas,
You should just want to milk it.
yeah,
If
but like,
you know what I'm
see
saying,
20
like-
or 30 years ago,
No pun intended, Barry.
No pun intended.
like 10 years ago, all I wanted to do was have more cows. But it's just like, it's not even a possibility anymore. So you're left with a business that can't grow. I mean, in Northern Ireland, you can't even get planning permission to replace a shed. If that doesn't tell you that they want our industry to die, nothing else will. And farmers need to get it into their head that the people who are making the decisions want the industry to die. They want it to change into what their vision of sustainable agriculture is and away from what we're doing.
Farmers aren't really aware of the power they have. I think with the COVID lockdowns, it started to appear, and I have a feeling that started to scare the governments, that the farmers were starting to realise they were essential. And farmers never feel essential because we always feel we're being browbeat down. And in COVID, it was the first time I seen that the farmers were actually let get on and do what they wanted. We had peace in COVID because there was nobody bashing you, and
We need to
they
find the
wanted
virus.
food, and it wasn't just as easy for them to ship the food in from other places. And I would say there was wee lessons learnt there by the government. We have to keep these people under control. because definitely the first summer of COVID, I found the contract was totally different. The roads were empty. There was nobody giving you any hassle. It just was so nice.
That's because everybody's been paid to be off and enjoying themselves, Barry.
They were out of the road, yeah.
You'd be happy to come for yourself if you've been paid to be off.
Now we're paying for it with the inheritance tax.
Yeah.
Monday night turns out to be disaster. How do we still take the benefit of the unity of the farmers and regroup? What's next?
Social media. Guys like him. But the whole thing is, everybody has, in my opinion, we cannot alienate the general public.
So that means that sort of physical locking gates protesty type scenario is a waste of time.
In my opinion, entirely. Look at Just Stop Oil. I mean, I'm pretty sure at this point they were funded by Shell. They have turned the entire public against the climate activist movement.
I would consider you the progressive modern farmer saying that, because like the vibe I get off the old hands is like,
yeah, but they're wrong.
it's the opposite of that. It's like, that's just grind the country to a halt for a month.
Yeah, but they're wrong.
No, I think that's wrong. And the French approach, totally wrong. You want to inconvenience people, not day in, day out. You want to inconvenience them to make them aware of you having a grievance, but you do not want to alienate them completely.
Well, a great example of something which farming could play a part in would be the anti-net zero, like the momentum that's going to gain behind that over the next couple of years. If you can align political interests with the interest of farmers through, for example, talking about how farmers are going out of business because of net zero, which is going to make the public's food more expensive, that is a very popular message that any politician would want to jump on the bandwagon with. And that could then lead to actual policy changes that improve farming. So it's like trying to explain to the voters, who actually at the end of the day have all the power, what's actually happening to family farms in this country. And
what I do fear for you guys is that this moment of opportunity for forming a bit of unity is going to slip past.
Yeah.
You know, that's remains to be seen.
I'm very worried about that too.
You know, I would like to see that momentum sustained.
Yeah.
But in a constructive way, as you put it, you know, like there's ways to achieve things and there's ways to...
As Andrew said there earlier, it's a plus in some ways, but I think it's possibly a negative. There's political parties latching on to farming purely for votes and not for farming's good. It's for their own agenda to get people involved.
How sustainable is that? That's where I feel like that, you know, the turning of public perception outweighs the winning of the political vote, because you'll have that forever. That's a generational thing.
Yes.
To change the culture, to love farming again.
Yes.
Don't miss your window of unity.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Right, I think we've put the world to rights, gentlemen. We shall see what Monday brings, we shall see what Tuesday brings, and we'll see what happens after.
Look forward to it. I must get my placards made. Going to do Father Ted. Down with this sort of thing. Careful now, Mr. Moore.
I thought you were making hats.
I need to make hats. I should have made hats. Yeah.
Make agriculture great, you gotta still MAGA.
Yeah. Make agriculture great, yeah. Like that is
And
genuinely...
then you see you'd be aligned with the Republican.
Well, that's fine.
That'd be copyright infringement, boys.
Yeah.
You'd get sued by Trump.
That would be a genuine smart...
At least Trump might come and fight.
That's
for
good PR. I would try that. That's good PR to get sued by Trump.
That would have been a genuine smart move, because what they need to do is build unity and build a movement. But will they ever think of that? No.